Welcome to Freethought Matters. I'm Dan Barker.
I'm Laurie Gaylor. We're the executive directors of the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Our guest on today's show is the Texas populist, author, and radio commentator Jim Hightower, who says, "You can fight the gods and still have fun."
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters, is the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers. We invite you to join us in our vital work to keep our secular government free from religious influence. Become a member at ffrf.org or ask for a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Freethought Today. Freedom depends on freethinkers. Watch prior episodes of Freethought Matters on FFRF's YouTube channel.
The theme of the Freedom from Religion Foundation's convention in San Antonio this year is "Do Mess with Texas." And our guest on today's show is a Texan who has spent a lifetime messing with Texas and with all the other states as well. That's why he'll be speaking at our upcoming convention. Jim Hightower is a national radio commentator. He's a writer, a public speaker, a newspaper columnist, and New York Times best-selling author whose books include Thieves in High Places, They've Stolen Our Country and It's Time to Take It Back, If the Gods Had Meant Us to Vote, They Would Have Given Us Candidates, and There's Nothing in the Middle of the Road But Yellow Stripes and Dead Armadillos.
Jim Hightower was Texas Agriculture Commissioner in the 1980s and early 90s until he was replaced by Rick Perry. Hightower has now become a modern-day Johnny Appleseed, spreading progressive populism throughout grassroots America. As political columnist Molly Ivins said of him, "If Will Rogers and Mother Jones had a baby, Jim Hightower would be that rambunctious child, mad as hell with a sense of humor."
Jim Hightower has a podcast. It's called the Hightower Chat and Chew, and he publishes a newsletter called the Hightower Lowdown, to which I am one of the more than 135,000 subscribers who value investigative reporting. So Jim Hightower, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, great to be with y'all and all the great freedom fighters out there.
Well, we look forward to seeing you in San Antonio, October 28th at the 45th Annual Convention of the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
We'll try to get the temperature down below 100 for you.
Thank you.
That's good. If you pray to the right gods, you can make that happen.
That's it. That's right.
So it's hard these days in some places to be a progressive. Is it especially hard in Texas?
I get that question a lot, but no, I don't think it is. For one thing, it matters to be a progressive in Texas. You're just not one of the crowd, and what little bit you might be able to do can make a difference. But also, we are a progressive state historically. The first state constitution of Texas outlawed corporations. You were not allowed to create a corporation. Outlawed banks. And to create a corporation, you had to get a 2/3 vote of the legislature in both houses of the legislature. So we are a state settled by mavericks and malcontents and a few misfits who have always been rebels and been battling the powers that be. In fact, you'll be in San Antonio, and that town is famous for the Maverick family, from which the word maverick comes. A man named Sam Maverick lived in San Antonio, came out of Massachusetts, moved in the 1820s, 30s to Texas, and became a rancher. And he refused to brand his cattle. So if you found a steer out on the range roaming free, that was considered a Maverick because it had no brand on it. And it meant, of course, that Sam Maverick could claim that steer as his own.
Well,
So
San Antonio, remember the Alamo, too. There's that whole history.
Well,
Wow.
yes, and that's up and down depending on
Which way
you look.
which side. I met Mayor Coates once in New York City, and he had been briefed, and so he said, some New Yorkers fought at the Alamo, and I said, oh, really? On which side? So that baffled him a little bit, but the thing is that the Texas spirit is a progressive spirit, and it continues today. We're about to send you two very solid progressive Democrats to Congress. Greg Casar out of the Austin area here, Austin, San Antonio, and Jasmine Crockett out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Two new solid Democrats, progressive Democrats going. So it's not all bad news here in the state of Texas. And also, I would point out that we're a state of irreverence, great irreverence. You mentioned Molly Ivins.
Yes.
She was a great. She lived just a few blocks from where I am right now, in my home, and we were great pals. And Molly used to go down, I believe it was to Terlingua, to a chili cook-off down there, and Terlingua had elected a mayor that was a little unusual because the mayor was a goat. And not just any goat, but a beer drinking goat. They would set a bottle of long neck Lone Star down on the ground, and the goat would pick it up with his mouth and chug it down right there. And that goat won re-election 2 or 3 times down there. So we got a spirit here that is irreverent. It is serious, but not without having fun attached to it.
So I have to
Jim,
say, even though FFRF is a non-political organization, we're a 501c3, I think most of our members would consider themselves progressive in some way or another, wanting to improve rather than conserve the old values.
So, Jim, I'm wondering if you're familiar with the history in the Hill Country of the Truder Union, the German Freigemeinde who came and settled the Hill Country area, and there was a terrible slaughter of them when a bunch of them were about to join the Union to fight slavery. So that's another thing that Texas can be proud of.
Well, in fact, I gave a speech recently down in a place called Welfare, Texas. You wouldn't think there'd be a town named that, but it was. And it was named by German freethinkers who came in the 1840s, not fleeing poverty. They were part of the wealthy class, many of them, middle class. But they believed in free thinking, free thought, experimentation. And so they had a series of salons and meetings and et cetera. And that town still carries that spirit forward. And that's just northwest of San Antonio, where you'll be in October. So that is most people think of Texas as, maybe having minorities that are black and Latino. But in fact, we are a state with a lot of Czech, a lot of German, heavy German. That's the 4th largest minority in our state, et cetera. So it's a very diverse state, and that gives us a potential that is bigger than the right wing would make you think.
So speaking of right wing and left wing, you have a saying that I really like. You say the true political spectrum is not right to left, but top to bottom. What do you mean by that?
Well, right to left is theory. That's philosophy. Most people are not philosophers. They are pragmatists. They live a real life. And they know that, in fact, the power structure it runs from top to bottom. And they know that they are not even in shouting distance of the powers at the top, whether those powers call themselves Democrats or Republicans for the most part.
So you say you are battling the powers that be on behalf of the powers that ought to be. So what are the powers that ought to be?
Well, the workaday majority, the people that were written about, at least by Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration, and were embodied in the Constitution, even though they didn't mean it at the time. And that has been the great political struggle of America from the very founding, is to democratize those documents, to make possible the reality of economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all people. So that's the struggle we've been on. And it's a historic struggle, and we have made incremental progress over the years. And too often, even on the progressive side, we fail to realize that. And it's, it is incremental. I think of the great suffrage trio, for example, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and et cetera, who had that big meeting in Seneca, New York in 1842 to proclaim the rights of suffrage for women. Yet none of them lived to vote.
That's right.
75 years before there came a possibility for women to vote. So they planted the seed. And that is the history of America, this constant struggle. And yes, we fall back sometimes, but we generally have moved forward. And it's important for all of us, I think, on the progressive side to realize that, because that gives us hope, gives us some possibility. And we need to teach that history so that people do not lose hope.
Something to live for. Wasn't it 1848?
1848, and the vote
48?
finally in 1920. And that was Elizabeth Cady Stanton, a freethinker.
And Susan B.
Yes.
Anthony. And
Right.
so we know you're not really the love child of Mother Jones and Will Rogers. Like,
I'm not sure.
well, who knows?
Yeah.
But like Mother Jones, you do say you are mad as hell. Why are you mad as hell?
Because the powers that be are running roughshod over us. They think they're the top dogs, and we're just a bunch of fire hydrants out here in the countryside. That they can do their damnedest with, and we see that in the workplace. We see it in the political sphere. We see it in religion. We see it in all aspects of our lives, and that is part of the Great Divide. I think key to the Great Divide in our country today is people do not feel that they matter anymore. And so they are mad as hell. And they are responding sometimes illogically by voting against what would be perceived on a rational basis as their own self-interest. But, rationality goes out the window when you're being stomped on. And these people are being stomped on, and so they're fighting back. We've got this tremendous rebellion in the countryside that has great potential and great danger. And the question is whether we, as progressives, and I guess even more specifically as Democrats, are we going to stand up? And the main question that people are asking out in the countryside is not about Trump, is not about the issues of social justice and et cetera. They're fundamental issues of where the hell are the Democrats? Where's Franklin Roosevelt? Where's Eleanor Roosevelt? Why are they not out here fighting for us? I do a lot of work with farmers, for example, have over the years, and they're being stomped on. They're in a depression, not a recession. An actual depression, and the dollar you spend at the supermarket, only about 15 cents of that now goes to the farmer. The rest goes to the corporate monopolized middlemen, and the Democrats have not stood up to those middlemen, and that would be a huge step right there for the Democrats and for progressive generally. Yet there's a theory in the National Democratic Party that we should just abandon rural America, abandon those red areas that have suddenly gone to Trump because it's not worth our time to try to woo them over. Rather, we should just try to expand our vote in the cities. Well, the problem with that is that about half the vote is in those rural areas. So if we're going to put together not just a partisan majority, but a governing majority with the possibility of building a new political movement that is based on those values of justice and fairness and opportunity for all.
So again, we have to say that FFRF is nonpartisan, but Jim, what gives me hope is, there's that book, What's Wrong with Kansas? And this past summer, we saw this resounding referendum to protect abortion rights in Kansas.
Yes.
That was so hopeful. And that will segue to when we come back from our break, we want to ask you to comment on what's wrong with Texas in terms of the SB 8 abortion in bounty law, in leading the country in banning abortion. Your thoughts on that. So we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist.
When I first recorded that commercial back in 2014, being openly atheist in America was still fairly uncommon. Today, the fastest growing religious group in the country is the non-religious, especially among the young. That progress is heartening, but the religious pushback is fierce and the forces of Christian nationalism are well organized. Our progress won't continue unless we work together so that reason and our secular constitution will prevail. That's why I'm asking you to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate, just like our founders intended. Please join the Freedom from Religion Foundation today. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
I'm Chris Calvi, and I am proud to be an out-of-the-closet atheist. I'm Chris, and I may look like Jesus, but I'm an atheist. And you know, atheists are sometimes accused of leading lives that are cold and bleak and meaningless, but that's not the way I see it. To me, I don't believe that there's an afterlife. And that realization that this might be the only chance we have makes my life feel incredibly important every day. Also, knowing that help is not going to come from above imparts on me a profound sense of urgency to work together to solve the world's problems and alleviate human suffering. That's why my purpose in life is to try and leave planet Earth a little bit better than it was the way I found it. I'm a graduate student, I'm studying microbiology, and I'm trying to develop renewable biofuels before it's too late.
Welcome back to Freethought Matters. We're continuing our conversation with the Texas populist, author, and radio commentator Jim Hightower, who says, 2 wrongs don't make a right, but 3 left turns do. That's a good line.
Yeah, so Jim, we were going to ask you about what's wrong with Texas in terms of the abortion ban, the LGBTQ attacks, the book, censorship. What's your take on all of that?
Well, our state has been taken over by a right-wing bunch of thugs who have gerrymandered the state and have basically been having a theocratic, a plutocratic, autocratic, kleptocratic rule here. But they do not represent the majority of the people of Texas. The problem in Texas is not that the voters have turned right-wing, but that they have quit voting. And largely because the Democrats quit being Democrats. Now, that is beginning to change. And as I indicated earlier, we've got 2 new members of Congress coming from Texas who are not just Democrats, but overtly progressive, aggressively progressive Democrats, the kind of Democrat that's going to make a difference, the kind of Democrat that we used to have here. Going back to Ralph Yarborough and Sissy Farenthold and Barbara Jordan, Henry B. Gonzalez.
Yeah, Barbara Jordan. Those were the days.
Yeah, well, they're not so long ago, and even in my time, when I was elected in '82 as the Commissioner of Agriculture, Ann Richards was elected to be treasurer of the state. Jimmy Maddox was the Attorney General. Gary Morrow was the Land Commissioner. We had a sweep of progressive young Democrats and heavy turnout because people believed again. Yet the party began to draw back from talking about those democratic issues, thinking that, well, we need corporate Democrats. We need people who are cautious and not going to scare the voters with things like health care for all or free college education or any of those extreme ideas that progressives tend to put forward. So as we pull back, then the voters pull back. And that, again, is beginning to change as we get a new, particularly young people, coming forward and saying, we want a real politics again. As the old populists used to put it, politics with hair on it. Politics that matters, that you can feel and touch, and that involves you. And that's what has been missing in Texas politics, but I think also in national politics. So that's what's got to change.
And why are we afraid of all these extreme ideas like healthcare that have served many European countries so well? What's wrong with taking care of our people?
Well, you've answered your own question, of course, and that is, of course, nothing is wrong, and that's another reason that people will rebel if we have a Democratic Party that comes out flat-footed and says, yes, we want health care for everybody. Everybody, not just Jeff Bezos and not just Elon Musk, and not just corporate executives, but everybody in our country. It's a basic human right, and stand up for that. Don't dodge it. We have the worst health care record in Texas under Greg Abbott, the present governor, who wants to, by the way, be your president.
Well, Jim, that reminds me, even in this newsletter, you've been pointing out that Abbott has refused federal funding. I think he's turned down $6 billion, is it, in
Medicaid.
federal funding in Medicaid, so that after women have a child, they can get health care for a year. He only wants to cover for 6 months, and yet the money's. Why would he do that when the money is free?
Because he's eaten up with the right-wing ideology and the right-wing, again, autocrats, plutocrats, kleptocrats, who have their ideology, which now controls the Supreme Court, by the way. Yes. So it's not just here in Texas. That ideology and obedience to a Trump sort of outlook on government, which is to serve the rich and everybody else good luck, that they want to serve that political goal, that narrow political constituency, rather than what the majority of the people actually want. The people of Texas overwhelmingly favor Medicaid expansion to cover poor people. We have the worst record in America on health coverage. We have the worst record on health coverage for children in our state, and by far the worst record on poor people.
Another crat is theocrat. And are you concerned about, Abbott and those right-wing Christians, about their Christian nationalism agenda?
Yeah, Christian nationalism is a euphemism for Christian authoritarianism, basically. If you do away with separation of church and state, you get church, period. And the church that those in control want you to have, which in this case is not just Christian, but there's much about the Christian religion that I certainly support, including the Bible saying that it's not the love of money is not is the source of evil. Not just money is the source of evil; it's the love of money. That's Jeff Bezos, and that's Elon Musk, and that's the billionaires in our society that are running us today. So there's much there that is strong, but you don't want a dictatorial church because you're probably not going to be a member of it.
And that's what we're getting. And of course, Abbott is an extreme fanatic. He is always talking about God, and in fact, he has told the Freedom from Religion Foundation specifically that we should not mess with Texas. He's really gone out of his way to castigate us and fight us. And so, Jim, what is your advice about how we can fight the theocrats?
Go right at them, including using the Bible, using the Jesus. Earl Long used to tell the story. He was governor of Louisiana, and told a story about St. Peter, about a rich man who died and tried to get into heaven. But if you'd gone to that little Methodist church that I did when I grew up, you just don't walk into heaven. You got to appear at the pearly gates, and there's going to be an angel to look over your life, and then St. Peter will render judgment about whether you come in or not. So here comes this rich man, and the angel looks over his life, says, "You never did no good for nobody, no way. What are you doing here?" And the rich man said, "Well, now that's not entirely true. There was that time in 1924, I put a nickel in a blind beggar's cap, And there was that time in 1934, a widow woman needed car fare home. I gave her a nickel. And coming out of my bank in 1944, there was a Salvation Army kettle, and I put a nickel in there. And the angel turns back to St. Peter and says, "What in the world are we going to do with this man?" And St. Peter said, "Give him back his 15 cents and tell him to go to hell." You know? So that's the way to fight.
Did you write
Tell
that
stories.
joke? That's a good joke.
Earl Long wrote that.
Oh, Earl Long.
And so I steal nearly all my lines from somebody, mostly the funny papers and baseball coaches and et cetera. But anyway, but that's the way to talk to people about what real religious values are, spiritual values are. Not a church value. You know, we got so many churches, they'll fight each other to death, literally. So you know, I'm not a fan of churches, but I can appreciate religion and people who have a spiritual side to them, which are most people. And so I think we've got to acknowledge that and then move forward with that. Talk about those spiritual values in terms of fundamental values of our country: fairness, opportunity.
Well, when you come to our
justice.
convention in October, you'll be speaking to a lot of nuns, non-religious people who also value those values of progressivism and human values. So, well, it's been a real pleasure talking with you today. Do you have any 10-second parting words from Texas?
Well, you know, we're really on the move. When I first moved here to Austin, there was a moving company that had an advertising slogan that I stole because I liked it. And this little moving company, two big guys with a truck, said, "If we can get it loose, we can move it." Well, that's what we're talking about, getting it loose at the grassroots level so the people can move it for themselves.
Very good.
Well,
very
you're
good.
here. Well, we're really looking forward to meeting you in person and hearing you speak at our convention in October. Thank you so very much, Jim Hightower, for joining us today.
Great to be a joy with you.
And thank you for watching Freethought Matters.
Because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.